Last but not least, our concluding panel, Exploration is Human, Medical Aspects in New Space. Our moderator is Alexander Choukér from the Academic Director and Clinical Specialist Anesthesiology from the LMU University in Munich. Alexander, welcome on stage.
Hi. Thank you very much. Please have a seat. I learned that I have to sit in the middle, so, but I feel that you should sit in the middle. However, I will, oh yes, we have Peter, whatever. Markus, thank you very much. Yeah, this was a start, so to say, into the field of the human in space, and this is a topic that links a lot of science, of course, knowledge about the human body's performance under extreme environments, as well as a lot of engineering that is behind that to monitor it and to overcome all these stressors that we encounter in space, and a lot of lessons to be learned for Earth. But what we think in this panel should be also targeted out of this topic. You know, what are the directions? How can we really, and Professor Lerch mentioned the term valorization, how can we take advantage of all this knowledge, translate it into, at the end, you know, value to the Earthlings like us, yeah, like we are here on Earth, and how we can valorize also in the sense of, you know, revenue for companies who are interested in investing into these fields. Yeah? And we decided in our preparatory meeting that everyone would introduce himself quickly so you have a better idea of the persons and personalities, the expertise that is sitting here on the stage, and to give you an idea how we have to tackle this problem from so many different directions. And I would say, let's start with you, Chris, with a short self-introduction, and then we go further in the panel. Please.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Professor Chris Rapley. I'm a professor of climate science at University College London. But I spent 25 years at the beginning of my career as a space scientist developing instruments to open up new windows on the cosmos, and then realized that turning them over and looking at the Earth could be quite useful too, so I've been doing a lot of that. I've done many things in between, including running the British Antarctic Survey, so I've been to the Antarctic quite a lot, and Antarctica has many analogies with space as an extreme environment for humans. And I've run the Science Museum, which is a venue, so one has to decide what attracts people to the museum, what are they looking for. And I'm now back at University College as a silo buster. I'm employed to break down the silos, not just between departments, but between faculties, which can be quite difficult. I also chair the European Science Foundation's European Space Sciences Committee, where we act as the voice of the community. So I've been fascinated by what I've heard today, and I have some comments in a minute from the point of view, the lens of a scientist on what I've heard.
Thank you. Thomas, would you like? And then
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Thomas Reiter. Actually, I have a military aviation background. I studied not far from here at the Armed Forces University in Neubiberg, aerospace technology. And then I became an ESA astronaut, flew twice to space, one time half a year to the Mir station, then to the International Space Station afterwards. Became member of the executive board of DLR, was responsible for space research and development. I see some of the colleagues here, very happy to see you. And then became director of ESA for human spaceflight exploration and satellite operations. And now I'm retired, and I was very happy and gifted to perform some of the life science experiments, amongst them also from Professor Choukér.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Judith Buchheim. I'm similar to Alexander. I'm an anesthesiologist by training, but essentially a clinician researcher and focusing more on research currently than the clinic. However, I've been in charge of space experiments on astronauts for more than 10 years now. And we've run several very unique experiments with different focuses, but mostly we are looking at how stress affects the immune system of astronauts.
Thank you. Peter, you want to continue? Right from the medical side?
Sure. My name is Peter Zoellenburg. I'm a consultant neurologist sitting at a professorship at LMU for structural and functional neuroimaging. I have, probably like some other members, come to space by chance. I was given the opportunity to look as part of a bigger ESA project, which is called ESA Brain DTI, to look at pre- and post-flight changes in the brains of astronauts when they spend half a year aboard the ISS, and this has certainly changed our view of what happens to the brain and what becomes important once we try to venture towards Mars. Together with Chris, whom I'm only known from Zoom, I'm sitting on the ESA Space and Exploration Advisory Committee, and similar to Chris, I've just come back from my first trip to Antarctica to deploy a low-field MRI there to study what happens to people who live in social isolation and darkness for over a year.
Thank you. Markus, you would like to? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. My name is Markus Häuser. My background is legal and finance, so I'm a business guy, and I have nothing to do, or I had nothing to do with research before we started with Space Cooperative Europe, which is a cooperative. And it's very interesting because we are running the ESA BSGN accelerator for agri-food, and we are selecting projects. We are helping them to prepare for the experiment, and we also provide co-funding to them. So I think this is the reason why I was invited. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's already indication how this discussion will be. Please, Felix.
Hi everyone, my name is Felix. I'm from URI. We're a space biotech company from South Germany, from the Lake Constance area. And my background is engineering and business. And we are at URI, we are providing the bioreactors, the life science facilities, incubation systems for the research on the ISS and in future also on a commercial way, also beyond. But I will also talk about it more later. On the other hand, we are doing also our own research on the ISS and being like the own customer for our hardware and trying to convince the pharma industry to build up a whole commercial market there. Thanks.
Thank you, Felix. We are very looking forward to hear your SME point of view. We heard already in the other panels, the role of science, research, and I would like to really provocatively start, with the source of everything, so the knowledge, Chris. So science as a source of everything and knowledge gain, and you as a chair of the SSC and representing the European, so to say, space research community in many fields, life sciences, physical sciences, planetary Earth observation, and so on and so forth, and with your background in Antarctic research, you can well oversee that. What do you see what do you feel, or what you could explain us, what is really the essence of science, of the real science as a source of knowledge, and whether we should, we just take it for granted, as we heard before. This is the Silicon Valley taking up all the knowledge, and then they make big business, and everything is then located in Silicon Valley. So where do you see is science really located in this game?
Thank you. Well, Alexander had warned me of this question, so I came prepared. I came prepared with this quote: "Without scientific progress, no amount of achievement in other directions can ensure our health, prosperity, and security in the modern world." How do we increase this scientific capital? First, we must have plenty of men and women trained in science, for upon them depends both the creation of new knowledge and its application to practical purposes. Scientific progress on a broad front results from the free play of free intellects working on subjects of their own choice in the manner dictated by their curiosity for exploration of the unknown. Freedom of inquiry must be preserved. Now, those were the words of Vannevar Bush 80 years ago in a report that he provided to President Roosevelt at the end of World War II, and advising the president on how to transfer the scientific apparatus that had been so important in World War II into the field of civilian progress. And he laid the foundation for the National Science Foundation, which has really been the model by which government-based funding has supported both basic science and applied science ever since. And he went on to observe that whatever mechanism you have to support basic science, you had better keep it separate from the applied science, because we heard about Elon Musk eating our dinner earlier today. He made the point that if you put the two together, inevitably after a while, the applied science will eat the basic science. And indeed, 50 years of research have shown that we constantly have to stand up for basic science. Now, what is the motivation for basic science? Of course, in the long run, everybody who engages in it hopes that there will be some benefit to society. But the whole point about basic science is it does not make that promise at the beginning. It simply is the pursuit of curiosity. And the way that we do that is by extending our perceptions. It's like the original geographic exploration of the world. We explored the planet, but in science we explore reality into the extremes, extremely small things, extremely intense things, extremely energetic things, and so on. And space, as what you might call the last frontier, is the place where most of those real extremes can be found. It's interesting because the observer is suffering extremes too, as we've just heard. And so there are two sorts of science associated, basic science associated with space exploration. One is the enabling science that allows people hopefully to occupy the moon in a safe way, physically and mentally. So that enabling science much of it will have a spin-off back on Earth, as we've heard, but it doesn't promise that initially. But also the enabled science of what you can do from the vantage point or the place that you get to. Now, the point I would like to make is that to get to the moon is rather like getting to the South Pole. And there's an interesting analogy between the Antarctic and the moon, is that having got there, Amundsen and Scott, and then the Apollo program, there was 50 years of not much happening because people felt that both places weren't really that interesting. In fact, what we know now about the Antarctic is it's an absolute treasure trove of knowledge about our planet, hugely important for understanding climate change, and that promise is held out for the moon and Mars or wherever we go in the future. So that's how I see the fundamental science and the applied science playing out. The only twist I would say is that I said earlier that I've been a silo buster, and as a natural scientist, the most difficult silo to break out of is from the natural sciences into the social sciences. I mean, there are many barriers, many silos. But most recently, it has become important for the natural scientists. We've heard a lot of incredibly impressive discussion today about very progressive universities, but there's still a huge mass of the natural science community who are unaware of what has been learned about humans, how humans really behave and really respond to information about the world about them. And this has led to a bit of a gap that needs to be bridged. If I take the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it prides itself on providing policy-relevant information, not policy-prescriptive. But it has become to realize that being policy-relevant warns policymakers that there is an issue, but what they actually need is actionable information. So being relevant is not enough. You need to be actionable. And the only way you can do that is for both parties to climb into each other's worlds and really understand each other. And I've been hearing that same message all along about industry and startups and academia. It only works if the two specialisms really merge together to understand each other's worlds. And I'll stop there.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this brings me to the question to you, Markus, the extension of this question. I mean, provocatively, one could say, out of what you said, Chris, we have to lift up the science before lifting up the rocket. But maybe this is not that attractive, for investors to wait 30 years until something happens. Markus, how do you think that we can, since you are really connected in all worlds, so to say, how can we value the science and in a collaborative effort? So how can we connect academia, industry, of course, and at the end of the day, the money that is funding all this, And where do you see the venue to go, and especially in the life science field, and maybe also some risk and obstacles in that direction? What's your feel about that?
That's a very good question. I think, first of all, we have to admit that without research, there's no progress. So we need research. And then the question is, how can we link research to commercialization? So when we undertake research, from the beginning, we have to look for partners who already have a business and who have, let's say, a usage of the outcome of the research or the potential outcome of the research for us human beings. So only if there is a use on Earth, we get an investor. So that's very important. And when we select the projects from the calls, from the ESA calls, we have to look into the commercialization possibility. And it's sometimes quite difficult to speak to universities and to tell them, listen, from the beginning you need a partner who maybe will help you also later on to scale up your outcome. And that's very important. We are good in research, but you need somebody who has experience in industrialization. And here comes the point how you can close the gap. If you undertake a very interesting research, and I can tell you, for example, one of the examples is, and here life science or agri-food is in common with life science when it comes down to the research on the bacteria. So, for example, one of our projects is research on microbiomes. Microbiomes can help to lever the potential and the power of biofertilizer. And this means, if you mix microbiomes, you can increase the performance by 90%. There are experiments. But how can you make money out of it? I mean, at the end, the shelf price is decisive if you take a chemical fertilizer or a biofertilizer. So the startup, for example, they just undertakes the research, the experiment on the ISS because it wants to see if there is an epigenetic shift which makes the quality of the microbiomes better so that they need less microbiomes to mix it with the fertilizer to decrease the price. So you see, research is very important for outcome on the Earth. And I think many people, and this was also mentioned in one of the speeches before, they do not have awareness how important space research is and what we can really reach with space research. Space research could be a catalyst for research outcomes on the world. If you grow a plant, it changes its genetic structure from the beginning. Something which would happen maybe in 1,000 years on Earth. Just takes this into consideration. So looking for investors is very easy. You just need to have a link to use on Earth, and then you find investors. And that's exactly what we have to do, stakeholder engagement.
Thank you very much. So these are the two poles, but I think they are not contradictory at all. But in between, certainly, Thomas, there is a mission. There is a mission, and since, as mentioned, the microgravity is playing a very big role, and we use microgravity in the low Earth orbit, and you have been exposed to this in 2 stations, as mentioned before. And we go further now. We go to the moon. I'm part of the Artemis program. Europe is very much engaged in the IHAB, so habitation, service modules, and so on. So which means we are kind of part of this mission, certainly in Europe, and with that, European astronauts and European humans as well, and humans per se. And you, as let's say, put the hat of an astronaut back again. Where do you think what are the strongest or the most relevant challenges that someone has to tackle when going, beyond the low Earth orbit? And what do you think are the major capabilities that the crew should bring with itself, or her and themselves, and those who could provide for a safe mission should do? What are the priorities when we leave low Earth orbit, so the vicinity of Earth, from your astronaut perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. I think that's indeed quite a spectrum to cover. Let me maybe give a little overview of the effects that happen when you get into zero gravity. I mean, leaving Earth into orbit goes very quickly, 9 minutes, and you are there with 28,000 kilometers per hour. And then this adaptation starts. So there is a first phase where the human body does this instantaneous adaptation. It's mainly in the area of neurosensory adaptation, which is also called space motion sickness. Some experience a little bit harder, others not. You can control it, but usually it's over after a few hours. Then this effect of fluid shift, which Professor Lerch mentioned before, you notice it after maybe 2 days when your discs in the spine soak up and you all of a sudden wake up and you have some pain in your spine. But again, this goes away very, very quickly. And then there are 6 months where you're staying in weightlessness and actually you're not feeling too much of these effects. Demineralization of bones, muscle atrophy, cardiovascular effects, the deactivation of the immune system, which is a great topic. You don't feel it really up there. You are concentrated on your work and try to do all this scientific work, the maintenance, repair, and so forth. And then when, of course, you need to counteract or you need to take care when you get back into gravity, so you have to do your countermeasures. And I have to say, when I compare the first and second mission, so first mission was to the Mir station in the last century, 95, 96, to the situation on ISS, the kind of exercise you do has improved incredibly. I mean, it reflected on the amount of bone demineralization, which significantly is decreased nowadays. If I talk to my colleague Matthias Maurer, Alexander Gerst, and others, of course, these effects are much more attenuated because of the way how they are doing countermeasures. So that is already a great experience, also in the terms of muscle physiology. So the atrophy effect is much dampened. And then, of course, you get back into gravity, and I have to say this is the most pronounced effect for me, probably for others as well. The first hour after landing, I would like to scratch out because that is not very pleasant. What I did not mention is obviously in low Earth orbit, we are in an environment with increased radiation, but we are still protected by our Earth magnetic field. Just to remind us, there are 3 types of radiation: solar particle events, which play a role, then the so-called trapped radiation, which is not really a problem when you are in 400 kilometers altitude, except for going over the so-called South Atlantic anomaly. Then you are a little bit affected by this trapped radiation. And the last type is the so-called galactic cosmic radiation, which is really high energy particles. Now, still, when you are in low Earth orbit, you are pretty much shielded. We know that people can accumulate many years of stay in orbit, and there was just a record broken by a Russian cosmonaut with more than 1,000 days accumulated in space, coming back and still nicely adapting and returning to normal after some time. Now, if we look into the future, when we will leave low Earth orbit, obviously, in addition to these effects that are caused by zero gravity, we will face an environment with much higher radiation. So the aspect of protecting the humans against this radiation, solar particle events, and mainly galactic cosmic radiation, which will play a much bigger role, is an important aspect. So these are, I think, the challenges, but it also offers fantastic opportunities in life science research and also in the area of biological and biochemical research, which is extremely relevant for here on ground. And I think your experiments in the field of immunology are a good proof for it. You need to consider that about 60% of the research that is done in low Earth orbit is related to biology and biotechnology. And if we look into the future, when, let's say, the next station will come, this will be all more commercial based. I would expect much more commercial activities from the pharmaceutical industry exactly in this direction. Now, to the last part of your question, what is the prerequisite as we are sending humans further out? I mean, obviously, you need to be able to deal with isolation. And interestingly enough, if we remember the days of COVID lockdown, my colleagues and I were asked to give little lectures and short experience reports how it was to work in isolation, because that was a situation where so many people all across the world were confronted with. So you need to be able to deal with that. You need other skills, be able to repair things that are broken. So that is going a little bit more into your training and the experience you are bringing with you. And obviously there is one aspect, going into space is still related to some risk. I mean, let's face it, it's a little bit more risky than just going on board an airplane and flying from Europe to somewhere on the world. So these are, in very brief, some aspects that are needed in order to do this long-term, all these plans in exploration, going back to the moon and even beyond.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas. To have this first-hand experience is outstanding here on the stage. And you mentioned two things already. I mean, the health risk per se that you, or the conditions that you encountered, and the value of this condition for Earth application, for Earth research. And I would like to hand over to Judith and also Peter. So you're not sitting in the order I expected, but anyway, I have to turn my head. But starting with you, Judith, I mean, it was mentioned, so the immune topic plays a role. So what do you think can we learn from space and translate maybe to applications, or could be either technical or simply knowledge gain for our patients?
Yes, thank you. So we've heard from the keynote already given that we see a lot of similarities with aging. So we have observed that in a relatively short amount of time, we see immune aging that tends to show signs of problems such as hypersensitivities, allergies that are present and that weren't present before. And we also see that in the aging population, that your immune system becomes less flexible and you show signs of autoimmune disease, for example. Now, the benefit here is that we have a very healthy individual that goes into this environment and is very positive about being in this extremely stressful environment. And we hear it firsthand, how happy someone is to report about that time, even though the return was terrible, apparently. And but the reality is the workload is tremendous, and it's a lot of strain. It's warm, it's cold, it's loud. They suffer from, depending on the individual, strong sleep disturbances. So, and we're not talking of one night that was bad. We're talking about 6 months or even a year, where I don't know how you experienced it, but some individuals, they don't have the high quality amount of sleep they should have for over a year. And if we go beyond that, we're talking of maybe 3 years of not sleeping the way they should be. And this triggers, of course, diseases. And the positive psychology of these individuals, what we call resilience, so the capability to cope with stress, is enormously present in these individuals. But still, they get sick. And even though they don't feel it as much, we can detect it and we can investigate it. And we don't have the bias as we have on ground with patients that come with pre-existing disease. So if you have an individual, a patient in the hospital, they have maybe some pre-existing disease, some things that you can't control for maybe lifestyle issues, smoking. So these things are usually not present in an astronaut. It's a highly selected, highly trained individual that is beyond healthy. It's very healthy. And now come similar mechanisms, and we can investigate them without this previous bias. So we need lower N numbers to really get into these mechanisms. And it's super interesting and fascinating to see. And moreover, once they come back, this transient aging comes back to normal slowly. So not only can we observe how this phenotype, as we call it, develops, but also how we can back to normal. And that's highly, highly interesting for a physician in an ever-aging population where these mechanisms become highly interesting for us.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. I think, Peter, the brain plays, as was mentioned already before, also a very significant role. I mean, as we sit here, our brain is working and we're active interacting with our environment. How is this interaction affected, probably in isolation and also in space, as was already mentioned before, the fluid shifts, and what can we learn for our Earth applications or for patients on, your patients on Earth?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. If you would have asked an ESA or a NASA colleague or Thomas Reiter 10 or 15 years ago about the brain, they would have said, not that I'm aware of. Muscle wasting, bone mineral decalcification of the bones would have been the main problem. Space motion sickness for 24 or maybe even up to 78 hours. If you're a novice, a young new space flyer, you're a little dizzy in the lack of gravity, but that's it. Nobody cared about the brain. Yeah, everybody was worried that the heart is working in space. Yeah, those were the early focuses of Mercury and Gemini program, but the brain nobody cared about. And here we are 10 years later and have shown with MRI pre and post that the brain not only sits in your skull, but in microgravity it even moves inside your skull upwards. Yeah, and it moves so much that all of the software that we have to segment the brain and to analyze it had to be adapted to those shifts. Because on Earth, your brain doesn't shift inside your skull upwards. Yeah? And those effects, Judith mentioned them, some reverse when they return, some don't, some stay. Yeah? So we can study brain aging. The first ones to notice it were the ophthalmologists, the eye researchers, who coined the term space-associated neuroocular syndrome, which, in my opinion, as a neurologist, not as a competition to the ophthalmologist, is kind of misleading because it's obviously a very prevalent syndrome, but the entire head is affected. The moment you arrive in microgravity, the temperature of your head is 0.6 degrees higher. Your ventricles slowly expand over a period of about 6 months, where you see that you accumulate fluid inside your head. You develop a very, very slow hydrocephalus that we have to develop countermeasures for. You lose a little bit of gray matter. We can now show that your brain ages quite accelerated when we look at the astronauts who return to Earth and study them half a year later. One of the idealistic things that I think that has come out of the brain research is we did the first studies on Russian cosmonauts, and the Russians felt a little bit injured that we published part of those brain effects on their cosmonauts and had to follow up on that with ESA astronauts and with NASA astronauts, just to show that we're all humans. Yeah? It's not part of the culture. Everybody is affected who's going up there. Everybody who's going up there for more than 6 weeks. Yeah? And for the students, I always use an example. There was a skeleton of an early primate found near Munich, near Kaufbeuren, which was very nicely shown in a Nature paper to show that us walking upright and having bipedal locomotion is probably 12 million years old. And that has led to the loss of valves in our entire venous system of the head. So the head is not protected against backflow. But in microgravity, the entire fluid moves upward. You have skinny legs, and you have what some term a little puffy face, especially in the early days, which continues for the entire time. And this changes the perfusion and circulation of your entire head. Your body adapts. You keep on floating, which is quite pleasant. You have a mild, really a mild space headache. Yeah? But the entire system somewhat collapses when you return. Yeah? And this is independent of the neurosensory phenomenon that we're seeing. So if we move beyond low Earth orbit, if we go to the moon first, hopefully the little gravity that we have of the moon will protect the brain sufficiently. But beyond that, there's always a discussion of the life science researchers with the physicists, what's more dangerous for the human, the galactic cosmic rays, the radiation. And I would say this is certainly dangerous, but for that individual 10, 15 years down the road, yeah, as he might develop some cancer from it, but the immediate effects of cephalid fluid shift will affect his 500-day journey to Mars. Yeah, and we have to protect him from that. And as a neurologist, we have some diseases like idiopathic intracranial hypertension where we see similar effects, and we can learn from our subjects in microgravity and apply that to this disease on Earth. And it actually, all of that space research triggered a lot of new questions. We're having a project where we're looking at patients who are being operated on in a head-down tilt position. The countermeasures that we're looking into for humans in microgravity might be, in all European countries, in an aging demographic, be applicable to bedridden patients. So it opened the door. And 10 years ago, nobody was talking about the brain.
This was what you mentioned, Thomas, that these conditions really offer very unique environmental changes that you would have never, you cannot experience it. The pull of Earth, the gravity is simply there, and it's missing in space. And yes, and there are so many, how to say, already questions from the immune cell to the brain. And I was wondering now, you're pioneering this field regarding, lab tools where you can help us, so to say, the researchers to mimic conditions that are encountered in the microgravity, probably then in fractional gravity in the future as well. So where do you see, how can you link to these questions, and how fast? I think you're a SME. What is your perspective? Can you react quicker than any other else, or what is your perspective in supporting us? Developing, that you develop tools where we could answer, or the researcher could answer questions that are very prevalent. Felix.
Thank you very much. So what we saw since the ISS is in place and there has been done so much research, life science research, we developed, for example, microgravity simulators for the, I would say, emerging and already big microgravity science community around the globe. So microgravity simulators simulating the gravity vector of Earth to sum it up to zero to an ISS level, and this would be is an entry point for many universities, researchers around the globe to entry this microgravity research and test their experiments in these conditions on their Earth lab, I would say. And this already led to grants where they could apply to and to go to the ISS, and there comes when we developed bioreactors, highly modular bioreactors for their exact experiments. And it's not easy to go to the ISS. First of all, launch is expensive. The space on the ISS is pretty much utilized. A lot is reserved for NASA research, for US research. And I would say there's now a turning point where the commercial companies are starting and coming into place. We're working together, for example, with companies like Starlab, which has been on the panel one panel ago, and we're working together with VAST. It's a US commercial space station company launching in Q3 2025, their station, and this will be a first microgravity life science production site where everyone from around the world is invited to contribute to, and you do not need to be within any NASA community or any ESA community to go to the station and do your research on there. So this is really a starting point where new space will help in future to solve these questions and also create a new commercial pharma market.
That's really promising. I think so. You're leaving the lab bench and going up, and this is really exciting. And opening this for non-agency associated researchers or even other companies, or pharmaceutical companies. That's really cool. Thank you very much for pursuing this. We have to do a short round. I realize the time is running so fast. It's just a pleasure to sit here and to discuss with you, but we have to do a quicker round. Thomas, turning the hat, so to say, on all the executive positions that you had, and also steering human robotic missions and all what you have done for DLR and ESA. Not looking back in this sense, but looking into the future, what do you think are the most, how to say, prominent endeavors that we have to tackle? What do you think, from your perspective as an astronaut as well as a steerer of the field, what is the most important thing we need to consider and then as a next step to focus on?
I would like to pick up a thought that Felix just mentioned, and that is, the ease of access and the time from, the idea to do either an experiment or to produce a certain pharmaceutical to get it back. So I think that is a very important factor. And this is very, very closely linked to transport capabilities. You were asking at the beginning, what should go up first, science or the rocket. I mean, the transport capability will open, and it will really open a huge future capability, and that, I think, Felix told us is the best example. So increasing the access, opening more opportunities for institutional research, where we are more looking into fundamental research, which is the prerequisite to valorize it at the end after some time. I think that is a big challenge. And if we think about the last session with Peter, he was mentioning a little bit the difficulty of getting wide spectrum of scientists, giving them access. I mean, you have only a certain amount of resources up there, and you need to share it for the physical, for material science, for biomedicine, and so forth. So with this perspective, I think that these constraints are released, and it will trigger a lot of dynamics of valorizing the research we are doing in human physiology, in biotechnology, in the area of pharmacy in future. This is, I think, really the key. And let me once again maybe echo what Professor Lerch said in his introductory. The effects we see in space are very closely linked to aging processes. So I can only emphasize that the relevance for our society of this kind of research, and to turn it into some kind of product, be it new methods of investigating humans, or into certain drugs that we are developing, new methods of treating diseases, is a huge area, and it is probably still a little bit underestimated what kind of opportunities we have in this field.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this leads me to Peter. I mean, you mentioned before what we can do against it. I mean, what we learn and what we can do against. So the countermeasure part, which fits very well into this benefit of space research for Earth, where do you see it in your field? Maybe in a minute. Can you summarize it, maybe what you anticipate to happen?
To accelerate that. First of all, as a Bavarian, as a German, and as a European, I would say that we're in an extremely unique position and in a rich position. There are no more space analog environments than within the European community. Yeah, I think this is, especially with respect to immunity and to the head, this is an area where we're ahead of the Americans, even though they would never publicly admit it. Yeah. There are 4 pillars where the countermeasures will come into play. Pharmacological will be one. Yeah, Ozempic, one of the GPL1 antagonists, might be a way to countermeasure the cephalid fluid shifts in microgravity. Exercise is one, but we're kind of indecisive if types of exercise are helpful for muscle and bone, but bad for the head. Yeah, because of the intracranial pressures. That's a discussion with Alexander Gerst. He was the first human to go up to space and come back with more muscle than when he left. Yeah, because he had trained so hard. Yeah. So the other pillars, and this is where the engineering community will come into place, is suits like space suits, like the lower body negative pressure suits, short arm centrifuges. I'm not talking 2001, and a space station that rotates with a diameter of 100 meters that would blow every budget. Yeah, but I think an engineering solution will help us. Yeah, and this is, I think, where we have to get together. And again, I think the Munich area is perfect for that.
Cool. Thank you very much. This is a very, very strong statement. And just, bridging what you mentioned before, that you are scanning brains and collecting a lot of data, and you're collecting a lot of data, and a lot of data is collected also in the space station itself, the atmosphere and everything is brought together, Judith. At the end of the day, and Professor Lerch mentioned it before, it will and we need to integrate all the data, the omics and so on, and we have to have a picture which might be AI-assisted at the end, and leading us to also have added value, if I may say so, to Earth, because the digital health and to understand the human, the personalized medicine, all this plays a very big role. From your perspective, and you are appointed member of the ESA Medical Board, where is a part of the ethics in here? Do we have a kind of a completely transparent, everyone's afraid of being transparent, but we need to understand everyone's, physiology to cure and to prevent disease or to mitigate the stressors in space. What's your feel on that? So where does the ethics stand?
It's also a lot of ground to cover in 20 seconds. I'll give my best.
25.
Okay, so for low Earth orbit, I think we also have an additional problem. The subjects are very visible. Your science is very visible. That's in contrast, not the same in ground, because you always try to protect the persona that you're researching on. And here we have a complete reverse situation. Even more so, the subjects themselves, they want to share images participating in science on social media. So this is a complete different scenario where we have to make sure these people, when they go to Mars or Moon, come back healthy, even return. So I would say whatever they need should be our focus. And I think that we should involve the subject even more in these discussions. And I'm quite sure that when we talk to professional astronauts, they are very willing to share their data in order to get there and come back healthy. So this is a different scenario, and by engaging them in these discussions, I think we could greatly advance our capabilities in doing so. But not involving the subject and making decisions without them, I would see absolutely as a red flag. And I think that's the good thing of space. You have this very, very unique setting where you can work together with your subjects, you can improve and their situation, enable them, and together reach a wonderful goal.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you very much, Judith, for your perspective. And maybe I've really run out of time, but the launch happened already. But we could just two short questions, Chris. Just to wrap up what the first question was, so to say, at the end of this, coming to the end. What do you think? So could you make an evaluation for yourself? What is more important, the technology push or the science pull?
They both go together.
Okay.
I spent 25 years in a lab where the engineers, the scientists, and the people who built the instruments were all in the same building. And the push and the pull allowed us to progress in ways that you could never have done if you hadn't got that interaction. Can I close with one last thought? And we were asked earlier, right at the beginning of today's sessions, about how to connect with the general public. And it seems to me all of these stories we've heard are fascinating. The general public is very interested in medical science, so there are very strong stories to tell here. But I would just go right back. When I first got into science, it was taken for granted that science was an important element in progress. That was in the post-World War II era. That is not the case anymore. Scientists aren't public figures in the way that they were then. The voice of science is quiet. So it seems to me we need to meet the public where they are. And people are always fascinated by the heavens, by, what mankind's destiny is, and the sort of imagery that is emerging from space missions like Euclid last week, where the data of one mosaic is so detailed that you'd need 25,000 HD TVs to display it as a single image, capture the imagination of the public so we can draw people into space through their own imaginations and then tell stories about the medical benefits, which they're all interested in. So that's the way I would close it.
Yes, we're not closed yet. No. Felix, just quick, just a follow-up question. When you grow, for instance, and you develop your company further and you reach a certain level, do you think that you want to grow further or want to merge with someone else? Bad question, isn't it? Was not prepared.
Good question. That's a good question. First of all, our plan is to build up the commercial fabrication potentials in low Earth orbit for the next, I would say, pharma change. And we will collaborate definitely with bioprofessionals in future. That's what is our company strategy. So getting in the real professionals in life science research to build up this commercial space bio product.
Cool, thank you very much.
And therefore, public fundings are always well welcome.
I think this is a given, yeah. Markus, so we come really to an end now, and so you have listened to all these different perspectives on and what the human is really challenged to, and what we have to resolve, and there's so many different aspects. How can we bring this together in a manner that we can really take a next step in connecting these entities to make this magic equation 1 + 1 is 3 or 2 + 2 is 5? Or what's your feel about that?
Well, it's very easy because we are the lucky ones that we have already the infrastructure in Germany. Mm-hmm. And we just heard that infrastructure is key, and this power we spoke about, are we ahead? Are we in progress and compared to others leading? Here we could be leading. And if, for example, Germany would create a value chain from, let's say, space service providers, Atmos, which is a capsular rocket factory, Augsburg, we have the infrastructure. If you have the infrastructure, you can develop hardware further. You can go hand in hand with research. And then if there is a commitment from the region, for example, from Bavaria or Munich, to become an expert, a center of competence in this, using the infrastructure, it could help both research and human beings.
Well, that's a very wise approach. Thank you very much. So, come to a close. 11 seconds, it was given an extra to me and to us. Thank you very much. So I think this was our intention, honestly, when we prepared it. We wanted not to leave, with a lot of ideas or something like that. Let's take this moment also as a kind of kick-off, really to leverage all this energy that has been on the stage and here around and in the next days, and to look for really collaboration platforms where really the natural scientists, the applied scientists, companies, SMEs, and agencies sit together and taking advantage of all the knowledge that is sitting here in Europe, in Bavaria, in Munich, in Germany, everywhere, and to maximize this cross-disciplinary research. And we should not and I liked what you said before, we should not forget about the human and the person who has the rights on his data. And we should acknowledge this, but we should face also reality. If we want to help someone, the astronaut or the human on Earth, we need to know about what's going on, but it's a very sensitive step. So I think this has to be brought together, and at the end of the day, there will be, along this value chain, there might be really revenue for companies and a lot of knowledge gained for society. And with that, I would like to thank you very, very much for your hard work, also in preparing this, the time you spent in the preparatory meetings with me, and it was a real pleasure. And now I think we have a nice evening in front of us, and I thank you for the audience to stay here so long and to listen to this discussion on the human in space. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.